If we look at where things are at with kids these days, with first of all, mental wellness, bullying that's happening in schools, the difficulty of navigating one's own identity, how do you, as a modern day dad, um, navigate the journey of having to be vulnerable with yourself and therefore teaching that to your kids when you potentially might not have had that experience growing up? What you knew as a dad that just put food on the table and that's it.
Yeah. So I think I was really fortunate in that my parents were like emotionally open with us,
Okay.
right? Emotionally, mentally, they were open with us. Like when, even now, like when I go home, like I'll stand outside with my dad for hours on end, and we'll be having conversations, and
Right.
he'll give me like the honest perspective on stuff. So,
Right.
as a dad now, I had the privilege of seeing that in my father, and so for me, it's not foreign for me to try and now pass on the same thing to my kids. Like my kids are still young. The one is turning 5 now, and the other one is 3 later in the year. But I know that as they grow older, like I'm not gonna. Yeah, great. I'm like as they grow older, I'm not gonna necessarily have an issue with emotional expression and passing that on to my kids. What I will say though is that like it's one of those things that like you as you're a parent you become more aware of certain things. So like I'll have so like I recently had a moment where um, I I recognize certain behaviors in my older daughter that I saw in me, and I know that as a child they were hurtful for me. And it's kind of it makes you take a step back, and you kind of become aware and almost have this like out of body experience to say, oh, okay, this is what's going on. And so it's almost like for me now it's like how I see parenting is like it's about guiding the child. And so for me, it's one of those where I think that like it's about figuring out and about having that self-awareness about yourself, like knowing, okay, this is where I'm at, but then also having the self-awareness to know for your child, because children being children, they don't know any better. Like they as they're growing up, they're reacting. As they get older, they become more self-aware, and they're able to recognize left from right. And so for me as a parent, I think like the journey is about in yourself having that self-awareness, and being aware and alert enough to recognize things for the children. And I think that it's a challenge. Like you don't know what you don't know. It's one of those situations where you don't know what you don't know, and as you're going along, for me the big thing is just like don't always be so caught up in the moment. Like take a step back sometimes, to assess what the situation calls for.
And in those instances, when you were mentioning you don't know what you don't know, how then does the collectives that you've got in yoga dads play a role in you guys being able to support each other through your own journeys of fatherhood?
Yeah. So pre-COVID, and sort of once or twice during COVID, we'd have get-togethers. I think the last one we had during COVID was a Zoom call where 9 of us kind of got together, sat down, had a Zoom call, and like I'll tell you the first session that we had about a year ago. It was just guys come through to my house. We're having a braai. You bring this, you bring that, you bring that, and guys pulled through, and like I was really surprised at the level and quality of the conversation that we were having. Like I thought it would just be like guys hanging out, and maybe like there'd be the odd question
Yeah.
here and there about like about being a dad, right? So like guys, my kid isn't sleeping through. What do you guys do? That sort of stuff. But it actually ended up being some really deep and insightful conversations that we were having. And for me, a sign of that was like for the first 2-3 hours, I was literally just listening, right? Like, yes, I was the one hosting and sort of running around, making sure stuff was getting done. But I know myself usually in those sorts of events, like I'll be chipping in, throwing in jokes here and there. But literally, like I was just listening to these guys talking, and I was like, the level of honesty and openness that the guys had in that forum kind of blew me away. And it's one of the things that made me be like, you know what, we actually need to keep this going consistently. And it's one of those where us just having a space where you can sit down and have a honest and open conversation. Guys, fatherhood is kicking my ass, right? Guys, I'm stressed about the financial well-being of my family. Guys, me and my wife aren't getting along. Guys, like my parents and my wife are having clashes. Like, what have you guys done in those situations? And guys genuinely opening up to say, yo, I experienced that as well. Like at the beginning of our marriage, this is how we went about it. This is what I did as a man in that situation to try and resolve. And for me, it opened up my eyes to so many things where it's like, for lack of a better word, I'll call them shortcomings that I could now see in myself, where I was like, yo, you know, I had those situations. How I reacted or how I handled it wasn't what you did. And I'm looking back at how I reacted in that situation, and I'm like, no, that's a better way to do it. I should have done that. I should have been that man. I should have been that partner. I should have been that father. And so I think it gives us a forum to just kind of get different perspective on what it means to be a man in a situation. And that for me is the value that it gives to all the guys that are a part of it.
With that being said, what, in your opinion, is one of the key drivers behind the state of masculinity today as we see it, right? So I think in the context of fatherhood, you know, there's always this there's always this joke every time it's Father's Day, and some people on social media be like, yeah, you single moms, sit down. We don't want to hear about your dad beat dads that aren't around, blah, blah, blah. You guys have made a conscious decision that, one, you want to be present in your children's lives and support each other as men going through this journey of fatherhood. Any insights and thoughts on maybe why that seems, at least, to be an exception and not the norm, if we look at the stats?
Wow. First of all, every day is Father's Day. I think we need to get that on record. Like, let's just be real. Every day is Father's Day. No, man, like, I don't, like, for me, I grew up in a society where most dads were present. I think that, like, I don't know what the statistics themselves are exactly, but, like, in terms of what I have observed, and the community that I grew up in, like it might not have been dad was present, like he was coming to all my soccer matches, and and every time I won a medal at athletics, he was there cheering me on type thing. But like dads are there in the household, they're there, and like a big part of the culture that I grew up in is that if you are my mom or dad's brother, you're my dad, right? And it's so I didn't grow up in a fatherless society, and I think like I have yet to come across, like I've seen people who've grown up in situations where there wasn't a father figure in their lives. But like I have yet to see it en masse, so like I can't really speak to that, and also I don't know the figures around it. But I think that one thing that I will say about like consciously and actively being a father is that shit is hard. Like being a parent is hard, and I think I speak for fathers and mothers in terms of like being there for a child is hard. Like people might crucify me for this, but honestly, like children are like crackheads. Like it's a thing that I say with love and affection, but children are like crackheads. Like when you sit down and you look at the behavior of a crackhead and you look at the behavior of your child, same WhatsApp group. And I think there's this lie that we get told in society, and it's part of the whole get a degree, get a job, get married, have 4.5 or 2.3 children, white picket fence, everything is lovely. Oh my God, did he just call children crackheads? No, children are sweet, they're angels, gifts from nonsense. Children are crackheads. Like, it's hard being a parent. And I think, like, the fact that we don't speak honestly and openly about that is one of the things that now, like, you have this thing of, oh, I'm going to be a dad and it's going to be amazing. Ufike fatherhood ukunyisa baba. And it's like, okay, what now? And it's you end up with that thing of, man, like, everyone else seems to be okay. Like, there's Mark and his family posting happy family on Instagram. You know, we go to family events. My cousin Tabang and his family, they're good. Right? Fuck, they've got triplets. Everything looks, it's rosy. Right? Why am I having such a hard time? And so what do you do in those events as well? You also, like, you put on a face, everything is fine. Like, Nana's great. You know, me and my partner, we good, we golden. And it's sort of, it's the cycle where everyone is seeing everyone else being happy. Meanwhile, we all struggling and we're seeing our asses. And I think it's not just a phenomenon around parenting. Like, it's a general societal phenomenon. And I think when you add the layer of masculinity to that, where it's like a man must provide. Auntie, you're the one that made a baby. You were old enough to have sex. You were man enough to have sex. You must be man enough to be a father to your child. Like, why are you struggling? And I think, for me, having the forum of yoga dads has helped to take some of that pressure off. To say, listen, bro, this shit is hard. Like, dealing with crackheads on a daily basis, that shit is hard. Right? Like, have that as your starting point. Right, so when you do feel like you're about to have a breakdown, when you do feel like you're about to lose control, like, you have that moment where you step back and you say, parenting is hard, number one. Number two, they're children, it's what they do. Right, like, I had a moment where I think it was my older daughter, she was 2 at the time, and, like, she was constantly crying. And it was one of those things where, like, you know the sound of a crying baby, at some point, like, it wears on you. And everyone in the situation gets frustrated, and it's like, And I remember my sister raised a point, like, yo, you guys, like, we were going through a high stress time in our lives, my partner and I, and it was like, my sister was like, yo, this child is crying all the time, and, like, are you guys sure she's okay, this, that, and the other? And I had a moment where I was like, bruh, she's 2. Like, it's what 2-year-olds do. They break shit and they cry. Like, that's what they do. And it's like, we need to get to a point of, firstly, acknowledging, 1, parenting is hard. 2, children are crackheads. Gifts from God, but they're crackheads. Right? And we need to start at that point of reality, so that when we do have these moments where we feel like we're breaking, where we have these moments where we feel like, yo, it's too much, I can't handle this, we take a step back and we remind ourselves, hey, you are a human being in a stressful situation. It's okay to feel what you're feeling now. Then you can look at, okay, what are you feeling? Let's unpack that and let's manage that. Right? And, like, we're not doing that. We all, no, life is good, life is rosy, Instagram, hey, filters, this, that, and the other. And, like, we need to change that. Then we can start breaking down a couple of these other challenges that we're facing around that.
Okay.